Uh, All right, and we are live. Welcome to the BrainDrive Weekly Development Call Update live stream. We do these live streams every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, so we encourage you to.
Okay, and we are live. Welcome to
And
the
still,
Brain.
somehow, I haven't figured out how to get it to go off without a hitch. But we do these calls every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and we encourage anyone and everyone to join us to discuss the development progress for the BrainDrive open source project. And I'm Dave Waring, and I handle the operations side here at BrainDrive.
And I'm Dave Jones, and I handle the technical operations side here at BrainDrive.
Our mission here at BrainDrive is to build a superior user-owned AI system, a superior alternative to big tech AI systems, user-owned alternative. And like I said, we do these calls every Monday at 10 a.m. and then we post the recordings in our forum over at community.braindrive.ai for anyone who would like to participate there and misses these calls. So normally we would go into a demo of the BrainDrive platform. But for anybody who's been following along over the last couple of weeks, we have pivoted away from the way that we were building BrainDrive due to recent breakthroughs in agentic tool use, and we're really rebuilding in the process of rebuilding the product from scratch. And the first step in that process was making sure that this time we have learned from the mistakes of the past and that we're building on a very solid foundation.
Mhm.
So over the weekend, we released that foundation publicly. It is at personalaiarchitecture.org is the domain name for that. The full foundation spec and some code that allows you to test and see if it meets the principles of that spec are live on that website and on our GitHub, which is linked to from that website. But before we get into the details of that, I thought we would sort of take a look back because we want the community to understand that while this is a major product pivot, the strategy, mission, and vision of the company have remained the same since we started thinking about this years ago. So I thought I would go into that a little bit to sort of show the history and show the journey that we're on and how this is another iteration of that journey. And then we can talk through how the personal AI architecture works and how it's different from other architectures. Does that sound good, Dave?
Yep, sounds like we talked.
All right. All right, let's see here. I got a little practice in before the call with Dave. Okay. So I started blogging about this, and I'll just share my screen a couple of years ago. Where did we go, Zoom? Here we go. Man, Zoom could really do a better job of. There we go. All right. And I started blogging about this a couple years ago, and it was really this post, this one right here, that where I sort of first crystallize this concept of really starting to just think about AI systems like a digital brain. And like a physical brain, your digital brain is going to need the same components, right? So you're going to need storage, which is the memory of the brain, somewhere for that to live and grow and evolve. You're going to need retrieval, a way to talk to
Yep,
that brain, which is the interface that you use for talking to that digital brain, just like you have for your physical brain. You are going to need intelligence, which is the AI models that we use with our AI system, this digital brain. And you're going to need somewhere for this digital brain to live, which is the hosting or the skull of the physical brain. And this basic framework of thinking about AI systems leads very quickly to, okay, I really want to own this,
hmm
right? I don't want to be using a big tech platform like ChatGPT for my digital brain any more than I want to be using someone else's
Goal.
setup for my physical brain. Like that's this is what makes me me,
Yep,
right? And I want to own this. Now, this doesn't mean I don't leverage other brains. I'm leveraging another brain right now by being on the call with my co-creator, Dave Jones.
yep,
Like this is two, but we each have our own brain. And as much as we like each other, I'm sure Dave doesn't want to take my brain for his own brain and vice versa, right?
Yep.
So this concept, really, this basic concept of this is a digital brain and a lot of the same properties apply to physical brains is sort of what kicked all this off and why we believe that user-owned AI systems are so important. That doesn't mean BrainDrive is going to be the only user-owned AI
Mhm.
system, but that we really need to have, as an open source community, superior alternatives to these big tech AI systems like ChatGPT so that we can own and control our digital brains just like we do our physical brains. And so many different things flow from that, and we could spend the whole call just talking about that. But I just want to, to keep this call focused on introducing the new architecture and kind of the journey that we've been on. A couple things have changed recently that I didn't predict. And I think the first thing that's changed, the biggest thing is we now have tools, right?
Yep.
And tools are becoming a major part of the AI ecosystem. And this agentic tool use, where the AI systems can now go and use these tools to do things, was not part of the digital brain. In some ways, that makes sense
Mhm.
because your physical brain is not using tools either. So then but the analogy holds. It's like, okay, what is using tools, right? And the body,
Yep.
right? And primarily the hands, right, are what is using tools. And this is not something that was included in this initial architecture. And so the fact that tool use is now here is kind of like the evolution of humans, right? Like not a lot happened until we started using tools, and then everything exploded, with progress and everything. And the same thing is happening now with AI, and we need a concept of a hand and the ability not only to use tools, but to use them in a way where they're not tied to the hand all the time, right?
Mhm.
Because it's
Yep.
complicated to try and use this hand if it's got every tool, it ever uses attached to it. So on the one hand, that was a real bummer because we weren't really set up for that
Yep.
because we were focused on this digital brain concept and not the body. But on the other hand, I think to Dave and my credit, we recognized that very quickly. And
Yep.
instead of just not saying we're not even going to focus on the body, we said let's redo this so that the digital brain can now have a hand that uses tools, right? And that is really exciting. I think at first when we started thinking about this, we're like, oh my God, and it was a big
This is
freak
gonna
out.
hurt.
Yeah, but because we basically had to throw away a lot of the work that we've been working on together for more than a year now. But once we started getting into it, I think Dave and I got very excited because it's pretty easy actually to have this. Once you have the digital brain and you own that, it's pretty easy to add this hand into the equation.
Mhm.
Pretty easy relative to trying to build everything on one system. You really just need to build a system that uses tools,
Yep.
right? And that's smart about using tools. So that was the first thing. The second, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that allows this system to be kind of infinitely scalable
Mhm.
once you have that hand that can use tools. The second thing that's changed is that I didn't think about in the very early days of this was it's become clear that another big difference between a digital brain and a physical brain and body and brain, digital versus physical, is because it's digital, you can upgrade all components
Yep.
of your digital brain and body, right?
Yep.
And that's very difficult to do with your physical brain
Yep.
and body. Um, the physical brain and body have basically been the same for thousands of years, right? And so there's a ceiling to that because the digital brain and body is digital, it's upgradable. And it's not only upgradable, but everyone knows that even if they aren't talking about it this way. And it's the pace of change in terms of how often these things are being upgraded. I mean, every day probably there's something new that you
Yep.
can that you
But you
can
have to
do.
design for that.
Correct.
The human body,
So
just like the human body, was not designed for that upgrade at all. So we can't do it.
correct. So you need an architecture not only that can has this hand that can use tools without those tools becoming attached to the hand, but you need a digital brain and body that is upgradable at the speed of AI, right? And this is what allows you to ride the AI wave instead of being washed away by it. But there is one thing, so every part of the system needs to be upgradable and swappable, and like it doesn't really matter because you could just adopt the next hand that's
Yep.
stronger or the next model that's smarter or whatever that is. But there's one thing about this that remains the same with the human brain and the digital brain in terms of this ownership concept, and that is your memory,
Yep.
right? That is what makes whatever comes next personalized to you and unique to you. And that's been the thread that's been the same since we very first conceived this idea to the brain to we were on Open Web UI for a little. We built our own. This is before Dave and I got
Yeah.
together. Tried to build my own, failed, got on Open Web UI, luckily found Dave. He was like, we need to build our own. We did that together very successfully. Actually, even won a contest,
Yeah. Yep.
and then or placed second place in a contest, and then now to this transition. So while it seems like, oh my God, like they've been changing their mind, constantly throughout this journey, we're only changing our mind on the how we get there. We're not changing the destination. It's been to build a superior user-owned alternative to big tech AI systems, or some version of that. We may have changed the wording a little bit so we
Yep.
get the message across, but it's been the same mission the whole time. And what we believe will take place, and the reason why we believe it's so important to have a user-owned alternative, a superior user-owned alternative to big tech AI systems, all those things are still the same. So we've been on the same journey together, and there's never been once where Dave and I were on a call and been like, are we really going to the right place here? Do we
Is
need to?
memory really important? No, it didn't
Yeah,
come up.
right. Yeah, exactly. So it's been that memory has been the thing. So that's what we're really going to be talking about today is and on the one hand it's like it's kind of a trip because it's a new way to think about software architecture and everything, but if you can kind of anchor it back to this conversation, it all makes sense, right? It
Yep.
may be a completely different way to do it, and if you don't understand this brain body analogy, it's kind of like we're telling you to put the wheels on top of the car instead of the bottom. It's like, why would you do that? But once you understand this brain body and how it's following a similar path in the digital world, and you want this tool use, you need this hand that uses tools without them becoming attached to that hand, and you want to be able to upgrade every part of your intelligence and body at the speed of AI while keeping that memory with you wherever you go. That's the foundation that kind of everything else sits on. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dave, and anything else that you want to add to that before we show the architecture.
Well, the first thing would, I guess, to every almost techie, for me, I'll explain to how I look at where you have the mind and the body, and while, as Dave and I were talking about, it hasn't changed for 1,000 years, but if you've watched most sci-fi movies, and it's like you see some old, there's a few of them, but if you see some old person and they're going to basically clone their brain or put their brain as their current intelligence is right now into a younger body so they can live longer, we are attempting to do something similar to that, but on the digital scale. Because the one thing we do know for a fact, as can be demonstrated in the past year, everything is going to change. I mean, literally, I guarantee you in the next 30 days, somebody's going to come out and say, oh my God, we got to do this differently. They've been threatening like diffusion models versus transformer models. Agenetic, that is at its infancy. There are still edge line cases that haven't even been touched, like agenetic payments or whatnot, just thousands of things. And the most probably critical thing since December is the coding ability with AI. And that is not, can't be looked at from an aspect, okay, I have a better junior programmer. You have to look at it like I may have to relook at how I execute things and how
Right.
I think about going about doing things. So rather than first do my normal, I love to do it. I'm just going to sink some code into an idea and let's see how it fleshes out. Um, we decided to let the AI kind of worry about that. We're going to initially worry about the actual, can this fit together without any code whatsoever and make sense? Because if you can make sense on English in paper, then translating it to code in this days, that's easy. That's the easy part. As of December, you
Right.
know, we even during this, I hashed through a few examples of code and quite honestly, wrong a few times because hey, when you're doing code first, you're apt to be wrong very quickly and not realize it until you're like halfway down a rabbit hole. Then you look back and go, "Oh my God, I went the wrong way." So that's where it's like, dialing it back and you have to kind of take your pride, put it to a side and go, okay, I'm wrong here. Let's redo this or go wrong. Okay, let's follow this spec as a religion. Let's not deviate, especially from, as Dave will get on the level one principle. It's like that's no deviation land. It's you have to be a zealot to be there. But being that will get you in this pristine little environment that'll make sense. And the advantage to moving this way from a technical aspect will be answered with as AI is right now and in the future, because it has all the knowledge it needs to extend your brain into tools very easily, very quickly, and in most cases, the first go. So if you could have your brain and you can go, oh my God, I want this to go do XYZ, and you just type it in as a sentence and poof, you have a new tool that quickly, faster than Timu can make a hammer. You could have,
Picking up the tool in the hand,
yep,
hammer it, and
put the
then put
nail,
it
put the
back
nail,
down and pick up a different tool, the
yep,
drill, put that one back down.
and
Use them internally. You own some tools in your
yep,
shed. You
borrow
use other
tools.
people's tools. You go to Home Depot and grab a tool. You rent a tool from a tool provider. All that.
Yeah,
Tool.
because it along with the spec, for me, it's the ability to kind of leverage because everybody's coding. I mean, because now with AI coding for them, there's people that "Oh, I have an idea. Let's see what that looks like. And it doesn't matter how they're going about it, but the ability to leverage that to go, oh, I like that, but I don't want to recode it. So if I can just put an adapter on it so it can talk to my brain and my intelligence, and my world becomes better all of a sudden because I now have a new tool. I didn't have to invest 8 hours, 6 hours, whatever it was, and it works. Or you inherit their maturity. What if they've been working? This is a tool before AI. They've been working on it for years. I mean, that thing's matured. To leverage that maturity in your brain would give you dividends perhaps that you didn't see possible before.
Economic explosion.
Yep.
Um, in a good way. All right. So we're we are we're talking about two. We've been calling them levels, but we're trying to get all the vocabulary straight to make this transition easier. But the first thing that we believe is there needs to be a foundational
Yep.
architecture for this brain body.
Yep.
And everything needs to be built on that, just like everything that humans do is built on the same brain and body. And we believe that, I think, pretty strongly in broad strokes, we've kind of identified that with AI, that architecture that fits this, that can be this brain and body. And it's so far we haven't seen anything that would lead us to believe there needs to be more than one of these, just like
Mhm.
there doesn't, there's one hand, it
Yep.
looks the same for everyone. You know, people's brain is in their skull. So some
Yep.
of these principles we think are just going to hold. That doesn't mean it's never going to update or evolve,
Mhm.
but the principles, or someone might come up with a foundation that does the same thing a little differently, but we're
Yep.
all going to be building houses on
It,
this foundation.
yep.
But you need the foundation, right? And the foundation is going to sit on dirt, and the house is going to sit on top of the foundation, effectively, is what we're talking about here. So it's not to say this is the end all be all architecture for all time, or we're saying that there'll probably be more of these, but we believe that they'll all be kind of around this same brain body, concept with tools holding hands and that same, tools, hands grabbing tools as the way to expand the capability of the system. So that's going to be the foundation. And we believe that if you build on that foundation and you follow a few basic rules, right? Like
Mhm.
make the intelligence of your brain swappable and upgradable, as an example, ensure tools never get attached to the hand and have to always be there.
Yep.
They can be there, but don't have to always be there. A few basic principles like this, and if you follow them, then you can build just as with humans, there's so much difference between us all, and that's the beauty of it. You can build AI systems on as long as you're following these basic principles that do everything
Yep.
basically and look completely different from each other, right? Just as houses and buildings and all of that, right? Um, so that's what we're trying to do first is make sure that we have a foundation that we really believe in. And, we want as many people as possible banging on this foundation and picking at it and seeing how we can improve it and making sure that it's architecturally sound before
Hmm.
we build a skyscraper on this thing. So we're putting that out not only as an open source project, but we're putting it out as a separate open source
Yep.
project. It is managed by BrainDrive. I'm not sure why my phone is, I've got it on. Anyway, it is managed by BrainDrive, by the core team here. But the idea is the foundation, as it matures over time, will kind of be its own thing. And then anyone can build a level two or an implementation or a system, I think we're calling that now, on top of that architecture. So the personal AI architecture is the foundation, and anyone can build an implementation or a system, which is a personal AI system, on top of that foundation. So we haven't, we've uh, basically we've come out with the architecture. I'll show you the website in a minute. And then we're starting to work on our implementation, which will be BrainDrive V2. I don't know, it's not actually V2, but the next iteration of
Yep.
BrainDrive will be a product or an implementation built on this foundation. That will still be an open source project. It will be MIT licensed,
Yep.
but the goal of that project is to have a product that runs locally and completely for free and freedom and all of that on your own computer. And we're going to offer products and services around that.
Yep.
So there's the foundation, which is the personal AI architecture. There is the product, which is BrainDrive, and BrainDrive is going to handle the BrainDrive stuff, and that'll be still on BrainDrive.ai and community.braindrive.ai. And now we've got this new site, which is personalaiarchitecture.org. So that's how this is shaping out. And the key difference here, as we talked about, and we're still working on, we just got this website launched, so it still needs a little bit of polish. But the idea here is with traditional architectures, your memory, which is not just your data, it's not just the conversation history. Your memory is really everything that makes this AI system unique to you. It's what makes a personal AI system personal. That is tied to the application. And oftentimes, this is even true with open source projects, right? We
Yep.
were one of those that built BrainDrive and then realized, yikes, too much of this personalization is tied to the system,
Yep.
right? Um, and that's traditional app development. And this is where all the lock-in is with big tech companies and basically why all of our data and knowledge is spread out all over the internet and we're locked into these platforms and concentration of power and wealth has happened online is because we have lost control and ownership of this memory. So everything about the personal AI architecture is designed so that the application is not the platform, your memory is the platform. And that basically just means everything that makes that system personal to you, as much of it as possible, lives in this your memory. It can have things that rely on it, right? Like all the different things you need to
Mhm.
leverage that memory, but it should have no outward dependencies, which is basically just a fancy way of saying if you decide you don't want anything else in this architecture, you can pick up that memory, you can move it, and you can get up and running in a new system with all the things that make that system personal to you with the snap of a finger and without having to do a big, what's it called, Dave, when you move from one system to another, a big,
You migrate?
yeah, a big
Yep.
migration or any of that. You're just up and running. And
Yep.
then last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to Dave for his additional thoughts on this is you also in this architecture do not have to upgrade the whole system to make an upgrade. We have broken it apart into the components that we believe need to be there to have this digital brain and body. And they're each component, as long as you follow the principles of the architecture, are each completely upgradable on their own. You can swap them in and out, even the communication layer between them if you follow the principles. They're all swappable, which means this system is all upgradable. And one of those things is tool use. The engine or the agent loop that uses tools
Mhm.
can grab those tools. And then I guess the actual last thing I'll say is, so that's the key is this engine that grabs the tools, the hand that holds the tools allows this architecture to be infinitely expandable without making it any more complicated or adding any more components to the system. It keeps the system very basic and every foundation looks the same. But what you can do with that foundation once you're able to start picking up tools is infinitely expandable without modifying the brain, the body, and the hand. They're always the same, and you just start picking up tools and using tools for everything. So I'll pause there, Dave.
Sorry. I think as the first mistake we made, coming from BrainDrive, especially BrainDrive, because that's where we sunk the most time and effort into, um, we had half right. Like we didn't anticipate tool use. Agianic, the way it exploded, when it exploded, we were like pushing that was going to be end of 2026. But we knew plugins, the ability to swap something in and out was going to be important to keep up, not just with AI, but we're talking about users because every user wants something different. And 6 months in, one of Dave's things was like, could we get it to the point where we could actually just type in a user could type it in a sentence and poof, a plugin would exist. And we were there. That was workable. We seen it work. So those things really ring true. The difference now is it can't be just one-sided. It has to be at the core level from the ground up. Uh, your memory exists here and everything else happens around it. And that one thing sits there. Now you can pull your memory out, change it from a markdown to a database or SQL type. You can go with the no document. You can even go with vector. It doesn't matter because it's still your memory.
All those things together as
Yeah, you
one
can go with
memory.
all those things together. You can sit there and you can have the Encyclopedia Britannica or a wiki on one little knowledge base, your personal stuff where you keep everybody's birthdays on another, and how you go about dealing with it is also up to you because your memory is your memory. Where I won't say we differ, we probably butted head the most is because my brain always thinks, and this is possible now. And so it's like, okay, I wanted to just inherently code things certain ways. But at the same time, it's like I realized we have to agree not so much on a spec design, but we call it the architecture. I call it a religion at first
Yeah.
because that's what it's got to be. It's got to be something you have faith. You just, that's it. And when you can get, and we had different levels because based on how people develop their applications or how they interact will dictate what level they belong on. Because some people will be, we call level 3, and they'll just do whatever they want. Whatever you imagine. And then you have level 2 where it's basically the same, but your defaults are yours. Or somebody else has assigned them for you so that they could just your life is like, hey, I want to run this, I want to own this, I want to be involved today. And so it comes up in existence after pressing a button and you're started. You start from not just started as in you can play with it, you start adding your details that make you you. You start telling it, what your projects are that you're interested. How can it help you move from point A to point B to point
How
C?
can
Get
I
a
improve? What
plan.
are my relationships? How can I improve
Yep.
those relationships?
And it all
How you partner with your AI system,
yep.
basically.
And then number one, the level one, it's right now, the question is not whether it is technically capable. It is whether it design makes sense, as in this is how the body should work with the mind. And that's like our own body. It should work in a certain way. And if we ever get to the point where you can have a cyborg body or a cyborg hand or whatever like that, great. But we believe that the same principles have to hold true. You
Right.
have to
And
you have
that's
to
the
have that
difference,
method of
but
communication. Good.
that's that difference between the architecture and a implementation
Yep.
of this
Yep.
is the architecture is the architecture. The implementation needs to consider, or the system that you build on top of it needs to consider what is possible
Yep.
today but we know by basing how we build the implementation of this on the architecture where we're making trade-offs
Yep.
that may introduce lock-in. And there's even a principle upgrade now around when you do make an exception, how you can make that exception in a way that makes it a crutch, like, for example, compensating for the weakness of local models if you
Hmm.
want to run small models on a machine. How you make that trade-off where it's removable in the
Yep.
future, assuming that small local models get smarter, which
They're
that's
going
been a
to.
pretty good bet up to this point. So that
Unless
should
all of a
not,
sudden we go no electricity,
yeah.
next month there'll be a new model that's better.
Right. So we're not, when you compensate for these weaknesses or things that cannot be done today and follow the architecture 100%, when you compensate for those weaknesses that exist today, you're doing it in a way that's a crutch and you're not building something into the foundation that's going to have to be ripped out or become a unneeded
Yep.
reliance that, puts it in the architecture for no reason effectively.
Yeah, so that's my little thing to all techies. Don't come at this like I come at everything, where you read it and you go, okay, that can't be done. Hey, because Dave and I argued about this for a few days, I think, because I'm going, okay, you can't do tool use like that because throwing a million things at it's only going to have it all over the place and your error rate's going to go through the roof. And I'm like, you need a second intelligence in there.
I
And
think it became you can't do it now, but you
yep.
likely will be able to do it this way in the future, and we need to architect for that envisioned future.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to stress is when you read the architecture, it's not about today, nor is it about sci-fi. It is about looking to the future and knowing that if you watch the evolution of AI in the past, we'll give it 2 years. That if you thought what was possible today 2 years ago, you would be so rich, you wouldn't have to worry about what we're talking about. But since the rest of us couldn't, where look at it and realize that there's going to be a very strong Quinn model within the next few months again, showing an evolutionary jump. They've been pushing too hard, too fast. You look at what OpenAI is doing, and the closed models, while they are closed, they do lead the push into direction. And so you have 5.4 hitting, which is a stronger model than even the 5.3. So you see OpenAI doing repetition. The other soft models, as in the open source ones, they're going to start following this. So we're going to start to see, we'll get back to the heydays when there was new models out of Minstrel and everybody else repeatedly. I think we'll move back into that for that. And then for that to happen, you need the architecture to go, oh, there's something new to use that can make my brain better and
Right.
to adopt.
And I just want to make sure, in terms of don't think about what's possible today. I do think the architecture is designed for today, because it's not an implementation, right? It
Yep.
is designed to be a set of principles that you follow so that you can adopt whatever comes in the
Yep.
future. So I do think the architecture is 100% what it will be today.
Hmm.
And the thing that will change is the implementation in the system
Yep.
as things evolve. And that's what the architecture enables you to do, is to adopt those changes.
Yep.
So I do think just a little bit of verbiage there is that's why there's a difference between the architecture
Yep.
and the implementation, is because the architecture is a set of principles to follow that are designed to last forever, and the system and the implementation is where all the change happens. So
Yeah.
we're not changing we're not saying this architecture isn't ready for today. We believe it
Yep.
as a draft for the world
Yep.
to look at and tell us if we're wrong, that this is ready for today, for tomorrow, for a year from now. But that doesn't mean, to Dave's point, I think what you're saying, Dave, if
Yeah.
I could just say it in different
Yeah.
words, that you can't launch with this architecture as an architect. That would be like living in the foundation of your
Yep.
house.
Yep.
You have to build the house,
Yeah.
right? And the house is going to change. And in the digital world, that needs to be as fast and easy as possible to adopt when electricity's equivalent comes in the digital world, when the engine comes, when all
Yep.
these new technological breakthroughs, all that change is adopted at that second level, and the architecture's principles should still hold.
Yep, and it doesn't matter what language you pick. It doesn't, like I said, what access way you have your memory held and like that. The architecture kind of gets above and beyond all that. This is how you go about doing it. So you can follow the plan no matter if you use TypeScript, if you use Python, or whatever your answer is to that problem. The architecture just glosses over it because that's not important. What is important is, hey, this is how you're going to communicate with XYZ.
I
You
would
can't,
say the architecture doesn't gloss over it. The architecture
yeah,
specifically excludes it because
yeah,
that's an implementation decision that will likely change and evolve over time. And we don't want to put that in the architecture. It's
yeah,
very
and
specifically not
yeah,
included.
yeah, yeah. Glossing over is the wrong way to put it because if there's one thing that'll create lock-in is when you make those technical concessions immediately. It's like, okay, I'm going to do TypeScript. Well, that's going to push a few things off right there. That's
Yeah,
why they
we're
don't.
getting into a little
No,
bit
well,
more of the details, I
yeah,
think, before we go. So
okay,
let's just pop over to the back to the
yep,
website. So I think we've talked about, okay, your memory is the platform, right? That's the biggest thing here, right, Dave?
yep,
And then, so how do you do that? Right. And the core of the system is just four components and two APIs that handle the communication.
yep,
And so your memory, we've talked about. This is where all of your data, your config, your preferences, everything that makes your AI system yours, we want to live here in your memory. And this is different. Your memory is different from all memory. If you hold memories in a Salesforce CRM, for example, that is external to the system. It may be your records in there, or you may think of them as your records and data and stuff, but that is memory that is external to the system because you're locked in to Salesforce to a large degree. As long as you can pull that data into your memory, that may be fine for you, and you may say that's not lock in, but it's possible for there to be lock in there
hmm,
because it's external. So your memory is the memory that travels with you. If it's in an external system, it is not your memory. Then there is the agent loop or the engine, we call it. And this is the hand that holds the tools. It's what allows the AI to tell the hand, go get me a hammer,
yep,
it to figure out where that hammer is with the AI, grab that hammer, do the job, tell the brain it's done. The brain handles it from there. This is the hand, right, that holds
yep,
the tools. The gateway is the front door to the system. This is the interface to the external world. And this is what all external interfaces, whether that be an interface that you create, whether it be Discord, whether it be Telegram, whether it be a self-driving car or a humanoid robot in the future, everything speaks to this one front door. And then we have the auth, which is the permissioning of the system. And um, this is where you control not only how you access and what you access, other people speaking to this system, and in the future, likely the very near future, other agents speaking to this system all flow through this auth. So these are the four components of the system. And these four components communicate with the gateway API, which is the connection for and how that's defined, and the model API. So this is where this swappability first comes in here is you the biggest thing you're going to want to upgrade. We already know everyone's already doing this. That's, owning their own AI system and in the local AI community is you're going to want to be able to swap models and use different models and upgrade the intelligence of your digital brain at the speed that the model updates are coming.
hmm,
So, that's why this is external. The models are actually external to the brain, but just because they need to be infinitely upgradable.
yep.
So, this is the system, here, and it's very simple in concept, but it's architected in a way where everything in this system, each one of these, the agent loop, the gateway, the auth, the gateway API, the model API, they're swappable, they're upgradable at the speed of AI, and you're not locked in as long as you follow the principles of this system to any of these. The only thing you're locked into is the one place where you do want to be locked into, which is your memory. Anything you want to add there, Dave?
No, and I think people should understand that each one of these squares is not necessarily kind of a single, but it's more based on behavior. So that, like, because you brought up auth and permissioning, sometimes they may not be together, or you might just have two components and stuff like that. But it's just understanding that it's more of a behavior viewpoint than a technical viewpoint.
Yes. And so another way I would say that's it's the thing that makes Dave and I's partnership the strongest is he can look everything at everything from the technical because he's been coding for how many
A
years,
billion
Dave?
years since
Yeah. Right.
80s.
And I can look at everything from someone who understands technology but is not hands-on
Yeah,
keyboard. And so the way that so we have these principles that we've come up with, which are, and these we need to, Dave and I, as Dave starts to get his hands on and build the implementation of this, these may evolve a little bit. We do want to solidify them and almost have these be like the Ten Commandments, but
yeah,
we need to battle test them a little bit first. Dave does at the implementation level. But to go with what Dave's talking about, we've already said memory is the platform. And so the principle that you have to follow to adhere um, to the architecture is your memory should have no outbound dependencies. But to Dave's point, there's nothing about the architecture that if you want to connect everything to your memory and lock it up with all these external things, you can go ahead and do that. Have a nice day, but
yeah,
you're violating the architecture,
yep,
basically. The other thing which Dave was just talking about is keep everything else swappable besides memory. And how you do that is the third principle. You have to keep the responsibilities of each component contained within that component. So you don't have intelligence in any other component besides the model. And that's how you keep these things separate and swappable. As soon as intelligence, as one example, starts to flow into other components of the system, like the communication layer, which was a struggle for us to kind of figure out, um, you create a coupling of the system. So you have to keep them separate. But then reality comes in, which is what Dave's talking about, and you'll see I get to take credit for all this stuff because I'm the one that writes it, but
yeah,
it's all from conversations that Dave and I have had. Dave, this is where he's like, that's great, in concept, but especially because we have another deployment principle where it has to live and run on your own computer in
yep,
order for you to own it. If you can't use local models, then that violates that.
yep,
So how do you do that? And this is where the exception comes in here. You can still add crutches, like for example, some routing logic, which
yep,
is intelligence, into the engine or the agent loop, but you have to keep it within the component.
yep,
So it's a crutch then that's removable by either taking it out of that individual component or worst case scenario, if it's gotten so entangled with
yep,
that component, you swap the component. And so
yep,
that's where this came from in terms of reality. It needs to be simple so that one developer, if this is going to be a personal AI system and it's under your complete ownership and control, but you need a team of 50 developers to keep it going, that's lock-in. So it has to be simple enough for an individual developer with AI agents to maintain this system. And then start constrained, expand deliberately. I can already see here I'm missing the it has to be deployed
yep,
locally. So we got to add that one. But this is our philosophy is the exact opposite of OpenClaw, where you just give it everything and figure it out because that creates a lot of complexity. It's better to start your AI system, your personal AI system, very constrained and expand, just like you would a baby, right? You
yep,
wouldn't just dump everything onto a baby. But the good news is in the digital world, it's not going to take 20 years for that baby to become an adult. You can do this very quickly or at the pace that you want to go and
yep,
depending on what you want to do with it. So that's this principles page here. And then before I throw it back over to Dave, this is the full architecture. So this is the architecture spec. You can read through it. Dave has a very detailed diagram here, which you can blow up that shows how all these things communicate. We go through a summary of each of the components and how they work together. There's the deployment model that we need to add a principle for. And it talks about it's in depth, it's long, it takes, but if it takes 15 minutes maybe
yep,
to read this, maybe 10, and then each of these components has a spec doc that's here in the left-hand column. So everything, if this is something you're interested in, once you're like, hey, I'm ready to dig into this, read this spec document, give it to your AI Everything is here. There's no other documents that Dave and I are talking about. If we come up with a new one, it does go to a draft. We'll start to post that in the forum, which is here, and start communicating here in the forums. We also have the architect, which is the AI that helped us build this in the forum, so we can have them posting and eventually people be able to talk to them. So I'm not sure what got me on that tangent, Dave, but I appreciate you letting me go on it.
You just ran. Um, but yeah, I think it comes down to, and everybody is recognizing the force of AI, and that's what it is. It's a force now, not just an accessory, or maybe if you're not using AI right now to facilitate or extend your life in whatever directions, you're automatically becoming a disadvantage. So
Yep.
you need a personal AI system to help take your personal life, your professional life, even your just hobbies to a new direction. And that's where this all kind of comes together, but it has to be evolvable, because that's gonna, like I said, we guarantee this is going to change. And as Dave said, all the spec docs are there, and they're written in a way where if you just have that repo next to whatever repo you're working on for your personal document, and you just tell it, look there, make sure you follow the specs. I can tell you right now, designing with this thing is relatively easy. Just make a sandwich. It really, because it follows everything that it needs to follow, and you get success. Don't fight against it. That's I got to learn that one myself. Do not
Well, it was
fight it.
good. I was thinking about that and I was like, that's what made this really bulletproof, or
Yeah,
hopefully bulletproof, is we debated this for 2 weeks, Dave and I,
yeah,
and every time, and he, because I'm not a senior developer, there was things I hadn't even considered, and he would be like, well, you're saying the AI is saying this car flies, but
yeah,
it does not say like how does that
yeah,
actually happen? You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
not choosing. So we were able to fill the
Yep.
gaps, within this system. All right, so in terms of next steps for the community, Dave is going to be building BrainDrive off
Yep.
of this architecture, and we're going to be sharing our learnings, one of which may be it's not possible to do all this right now, and we're going to make these trade-offs, but we'll show you, in relation to the architecture, where and how we've made those trade-offs. Other people that want to build a personal AI system for themselves, or want to build a personal AI system for other people to use as their own, to own and control as their own AI system without lock-in, we encourage you take this foundational architecture, use it to do what BrainDrive is doing. If our vision for user-owned AI comes true, there is so much opportunity. Like, we are not worried about
Yep.
competition. Like, please, we want right now, if we're going to really compete and build a superior alternative to big tech AI systems, it's going to take a lot more than me and Dave to do
Yeah.
that. And we really need a community and the open source community, to be working on this. The good news is the architecture already allows us to adopt a lot of
Yep.
the things that the open source community has made so much progress on. So we'll benefit from that either way. But we would love to have a core group of people, and you'll be talking directly in the forums to me and Dave.
Yep.
Like, you'll be rocking on this and be early on it. So we'd love it if you join us. And I think since it's 10:48, unless there's anything else you want to say, Dave, we
Nope.
can probably just leave it there.
Yep. I'm good. Next week we'll probably be showing some of what we're talking about, seeing it in
Yes.
action and how it comes together. Because hey, I did the practice one. It was so easy to put together. It was kind of mind blowing. So guaranteed we'll have something to play with and say, hey, this is what it's kind of looking together. And for me, I think I would love to see both a level one and moving to a level two, so that we can demonstrate these trade-offs and how not to have so much lock-in when you make a trade-off, and so that you can go, okay, I'm just waiting for this to get better, and then I'm going to grow up type
Right.
stuff.
Awesome. All right. With that, as we discussed, we do these calls every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and we post the recordings over on our forums at community.braindrive.ai. You can follow us in both places. If you're interested in the architecture specifically, visit us over at personalaiarchitecture.org, which is where we're going to be talking about all the architecture stuff. And if you're a system implementer that wants to follow us along on how we're building that, we'll be posting that on the product related stuff on community.braindrive.ai. But there's a lot of crossover in both
Yeah.
places, and we're going to be using examples to demonstrate the architecture. So follow us in both places. Come
Yep.
talk to us wherever you are. If you happen to talk to us in a place and we think it should be in another place, we'll just tell you that. No harm, no foul. We're trying to figure out how to keep all this organized and not make it super difficult to participate. But this is a new, big transition we've just made. So there's some cleanup and figuring out of operations to do, which is on me, and we'll get that done for next week as well. So
Yep.
with that, we'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
Thank you.